think it's past. Merry Christmas. I haven't done a story in a while, so I thought today would be a good day to do a story. With it being the season of Advent, I tossed and turned with a few stories, but I thought I'd tell a story with these sort of themes. When you're at rock bottom, when you're at the lowest of the low and there seems to be no way out, remember, things can always get worse. This was a story originally by Hans Christian Andersen. I've adapted it slightly, and this is the story I shall share. It was a December morning, as the sun rose high over the Scandinavian forest, and with it being December, promptly began to settle again. The littlest fir tree always wanted to see that great big orange ball of fire, but because the trees were around him, just a little bit taller, he never got to. They blocked the rays. And not only that, they also took his food and his water, meaning that even if he wanted to, he couldn't stretch and see the sun. He'd heard so much about it from the hares and the birds and the other trees. But try as he might, he just couldn't grow those extra inches. He was an unhappy little tree. I wish I was taller. I wish I could see the sun. But the littlest fir tree didn't do anything about his predicament. If he did, this story would have had a very different ending. So as he moped and he self-deprecated and he warbled on about all that was wrong in the world, he wondered about the lives that the other trees would live. Some, he heard, would be taken away and turned into huge masts for gigantic ships that would sail across the Scandinavian seas to other worlds. How cool it would be to sail the 7 seas, to see the 4 corners of the earth, to have the wind rushing through your tree-like hair, feel the branches rustle as the waves lapped on the boat. As the littlest fir tree thought about this, he noticed some of those trees were disappearing. Quite a few, actually. Each of them crashing down to the ground at an alarming rate. Now you, dear viewer or listener, I can reveal that those trees were being taken into the Scandinavian houses so that the Scandinavian families could keep their little hands warm for just a few mere moments. Before he knew it, the littlest fir tree was the only tree in the forest. Think of that for just a moment. This forest went on for miles and miles. All those giant trees, all of them gone. In a funny way, the littlest fir tree was now the tallest tree in the forest. Oh, I miss all the other trees. I feel so alone. I can see the sun, but it's not all that exciting. As the tree moaned once more, a jeep pulled up by the side of the road, and a family got out. 2 children ran straight at the littlest fir tree, faces beaming with smiles. "We want this one! We want this one! Daddy, please can we have this one?" The man came out and said, yes, that will be the one. Not that they had much choice. The man then pulled out a sharp axe and began to swing it at the bottom of the littlest fir tree. He felt every single swing of that axe, every time it cut into his trunk, until eventually he blacked out and he fell to the ground, darkness engulfing him. When he woke, he was in a very strange place indeed. It was a sort of metal cage. There was a glass window above him. He was strapped down onto a platform, and the straps were so rough, they cut into his branches and his trunk. The cage was moving, and it was bouncing. And when the littlest fir tree looked out of that window and finally got used to what was happening outside, it changed. And this happened a lot. The littlest fir tree realised he was moving. It was an unpleasant journey, and it took a long, long time. But soon that cage stopped, and the family got out and they opened that window and they took out the littlest fir tree. He went into a whole new world. It appeared that there were lots of cages, but they were quite big cages and they all looked different. He went through a few until eventually he stopped in this one. And then he was pushed up in a corner. The sky above him was really low, and the top of the littlest fir tree didn't quite fit. The sky was hard. So he sort of bent over at the top, craning his neck, creating that sort of pain that builders or labourers get when they're carrying things all day long. The littlest fir tree was very confused, and he didn't like this new place. He hoped he wouldn't be here long. He was there a long time. As he looked around, he saw the family all over the place, but they were very small and they weren't moving. They were like snapshots in time. At the other side of the room, there was a strange shaped tree. It was very long and it had things on it, items that he'd never seen before, but some did look like flowers. Around that tree there were unusually shaped trees. Very strange angle, and the family sat on these trees and ate meals. Next to him there was an angry beast. Sometimes this beast would be very light, and when it was light the room would be warm. But sometimes the beast would disappear, and when it disappeared, the room would be cold. The littlest fir tree wondered what sort of creature could have that power, almost like the sun. As the days passed, the littlest fir tree noticed that the family were building up to something. They were setting things. They were writing on very small bits of tree and putting them inside other bits. Sometimes other people would come round, people he hadn't seen before. The family seemed very likeable, and he quite enjoyed their giddy humour. But at night he reflected. I wish I was back in that forest. I wish I was back with the hares and the birds and all the other trees. The next morning, the family came straight at him. He was a little bit alarmed. They each had jewels in their hand of different colours. They forced the jewels onto the ends of his twigs. Some of the twigs cracked, and that hurt. The sort of feeling you might get when you've cut your fingernail too short and it's rubbed the tip of your finger. All of the family were starting to put these jewels on all of his limbs, and some of his furs would break off. It would even cut into his branches. He wondered why he was wearing these items. Then the man came with a star-shaped jewel. He grabbed the top of the littlest fir tree and pulled him down. He forced that star onto the top. But whenever he let go, the star would fall off. Grumpily, he took the star and went away. The littlest fir tree hoped that his torture was over. But then they came again. This time with a shiny, long scarf-like item. They wrapped it around the littlest fir tree. And it wasn't heavy, but it itched. It was uncomfortable and he couldn't scratch it. He couldn't get rid of it. He couldn't do anything. And then the family left. And he was there with these heavy jewels and this itchy scarf. The littlest fir tree wasn't happy. He thought back to a few days ago. I wish I was back in the forest. I wish I was the only tree. I wish I could see the sun again. It was actually quite nice after all. The next day, the family came back into the cage and the excitement was unreal. It was as if like a spark had been lit. The littlest fir tree hadn't noticed, but small boxes covered in different coloured wrapping had appeared under him. And the children were now taking them and ripping them open. The littlest fir tree thought it was strange that this wrapping had put on just for it to be taken off. As he watched, he saw items appearing in these boxes, items that brought the children much joy. And their euphoria lit the man and the woman's. And soon they were all dancing and singing, and these strange repetitive melodies began coming out from other cages. The littlest fir tree quite enjoyed this. Later that day, the family sat around that strange tree creation and they ate the biggest feast the littlest fir tree had ever seen. He started to become quite attached to these people. Yeah, he was happy. He could actually say, for the first time, with certainty, he was happy. Yeah, my neck hurts. And yeah, I'm in a strange place that sometimes it's hot and sometimes it's cold. And yeah, there's these jewels on the edge of my twigs and it cuts into the branches. And yeah, there's this scarf around me and it's really itchy. And yeah, there's no other trees. And yeah, I don't see any other creatures, apart from this angry one that doesn't talk to me. But the family are nice. And God, the days are different. Every day in the forest were the same, but I don't know what's coming one day to the next. As the littlest fir tree went to sleep that night, he was happy about the present. And in fact, he was a little bit excited about what tomorrow held. Well, tomorrow came, and it was a significant day indeed. The littlest fir tree was taken out of that corner, and he was taken outside. All of the family were there. And he thought, maybe I'm about to say goodbye to these people who have looked after me. I'll be returned to the wild. Maybe there'll be other trees there. I'm going to start to take things, be more grateful for everything. Yeah, the littlest fir tree had learned something. But then he saw that axe, that sharp, horrible weapon coming at him. And it swung and it chopped the bottom of his trunk off. Oh, I wonder if I'm going to go back into that corner. Well, at least now I'll fit into the sky and my neck won't hurt quite as much. But the swinging didn't stop there. It kept coming over and over and over again, making the littlest fir tree into these tiny little logs. And then the family picked him up and took him and placed him inside a hole. It was very cold. No, it was warm. It was getting warm. It was getting really, really hot. He noticed it was getting light as well. He looked out of the hole, and there all of the family were. The family that he'd grown to love, staring at him. He didn't know what he was meant to do. Do a performance? What was he meant to do? They were expecting something. They had their hands out. As he was thinking, and his thinking went into overdrive, he suddenly saw the flames take hold. He was inside that monster. He stared into the eyes of the children and then blacked out forever. Merry Christmas.